Hello, my name is Tammy Bobyk, and I'm the Executive Director for Shikade Biiwaase'aa, and one of our programs besides Aboriginal Head Start is the Biiwaase'aa Program, which is what we'll be talking about today.
Bonjour, John Akliensa Nishtakas, Nadawe Nine, Anarauto Dem, Aquasasni Dintibra. My name is John Hodson. I'm the Director for the Maamaawisiiwin Education Research Center here in Thunder Bay, and I have worked for the last year, a number of colleagues and I have worked for the last year with the Biiwaase'aa Program. Dr. Gillian Kitchen at Brock University, and a young graduate student, Aaron Hodson, also at Brock University. Miigwech.
So Biiwaase'aa was formerly known as the Neighborhood Capacity Building Project, and we were bestowed with our Aboriginal name by our late elder Agnes Hardy, and basically it speaks to the beginning of the day when the sun is coming up and people have hope in their hearts. And I think that for the youth and the children and the families that we reach, that we're providing that hope in their hearts by having youth outreach workers that are full-time in the in-school component. They're also part of the after-school component, and they help with food supplementation during the day, as well as our structured activities and field trip Fridays.
So last year in 2012-13, the consortium of researchers that worked on this project and produced this report worked with the youth outreach workers in 7 schools to determine the effectiveness of this program. And one of the things that we were looking at was not only collecting the narratives of the kids involved in the program, but also the parents of those kids, the caregivers of those kids, and the youth outreach workers as well. So we spoke to 23 kids in talking circles across the city in 7 different schools in 12-13, and we talked to 8 outreach workers, and we talked to about half a dozen parents as well, parents of or caregivers of the children that are registered Biiwaase'aa students. What we found was an extraordinary experience because we were there every day. We made a rotation each week through each of the 7 schools, and we got to know, we played with the kids, sometimes we taught kids, did little mini lectures for them, worked with the youth outreach workers in an effort to better understand how the program worked. And then at the end of the year, come spring 2013, we started bringing circles of kids together in private kinds of circumstances in the schools during regular school hours and talked to them openly about their experience of Biiwaase'aa. And it was an extraordinary experience. These kids were in grade 6. Now, most people would think that grade 6 kids aren't very bright or aren't very articulate, and I'm here to tell you that all of those 23 kids were extraordinarily articulate. They knew exactly what was going on in terms of their education, exactly the shortfalls of their education, and more importantly, they had a great appreciation for Biiwaase'aa. So the other part of the research was looking at the records of these kids and these 23 kids, and we looked at their, with permission of their parents, of course, their caregivers, looked at their records and over a period of 2 to 3 years, and we tried to connect their involvement in the program to increases or decreases in some of the academic measurements that schools find important. Things like literacy scores, things like math scores, attendance, lateness, behavioral issues. And here's what we found. Kids that were involved in Biiwaase'aa, kids that were active participants on a regular basis in Biiwaase'aa in grade 6, over a period of 3 years, we could gradually see increases in all the good stuff and decreases in the stuff that wasn't so good, like behavioral issues, decreases in lateness, increases in attendance, increases in literacy scores, increases in math scores. It was a phenomenal experience, and that's what this study is about. It looks at the narratives of those kids and how they appreciated the program that they're in and how effective it was in their lives, but also the outcome that it had on the academic indicators that I mentioned earlier. The long and the short of it is Biiwaase'aa keeps kids in school and helps them because they have an Anishinaabe presence in their schools. They have youth outreach workers who are dedicated individuals, extraordinarily adept at their culture. Some of them speak fluent Maamaawisiiwin. And those people help those students. They are tutors, they are mentors, they work as go-betweens between teachers and principals and families and students, and they create a place, a safe Anishinaabe place in those schools for those kids. And that's what we found. It's an extraordinary experience, and I want to thank you.
Which to you also. The impact that the program is having is always something that you wonder about, because when you're doing something at that time and in that space, you see a lot of things like immediately, but it's the long-term effect that you start to run into these children, which are youth now, or in teenage years, and you see them coming back to the program wanting to help volunteer or just be involved, or they're into high school now, and when our youth outreach workers at the time a few years ago would go back and see them and meet with them, they just felt so grounded again. And that's something that is really important, that you're having an effect that's continuing. It starts small and it just grows and grows, and our goal is to be able to provide that support and assistance throughout an educational continuum. What we find is that at Shkode, when we start with Aboriginal Head Start, we have them to almost 6 years of age. With full day kindergarten, that is changing. However, a lot of the children at that time end up going into the schools that we are in, and then it moves forward like that. And we strongly believe, having been having education as an important part of our lives, that it will be for them as well. And the longer we can keep them in school and keep them active and engaged and wanting to participate in things just outside of their community and extracurricular activities we can bring them on, the more life skills they accomplish and achieve, the more peer-to-peer relations they have, and not only amongst themselves, but it's an inclusive program. It's just not exclusive. If a child is hungry during the day, nobody's turned away. If they would love to participate in the after-school program, that is fine too. So a lot of times what you're seeing indirectly is a lot of cross-cultural things that are happening that are very positive. And when children are able to experience that, it trickles upwards and downwards and helps teach and show the older generations that this is still possible, this is still hopeful.
One of the things that we believe is extraordinarily important is expansion of the program. As Tammy said, the top end age group is 13, roughly grade 6. But after grade 6 in this city, in the city of Thunder Bay, where almost 50% of the student body is Aboriginal, there's nothing that's cultural in the schools, or at least very little. Biiwaase'aa is a program that works. It statistically works and is demonstrated in this report. It works when you listen to or if you read the narratives of the kids, from the voices of the children, it works. This is a program that needs to be extended into senior elementary, grades 7 and 8, as well as into high schools, especially schools with high percentages of Aboriginal populations. Tammy said earlier, and I think this is an important consideration, the study that we did looked specifically at Aboriginal kids and worked with Aboriginal kids. But Biiwaase'aa is a program for all children. And when we would attend Biiwaase'aa schools throughout the week in 2012-13, a large percentage of the students that were in that program were non-Aboriginal, and yet they were being exposed to Aboriginal culture. And a lot of we know that a lot of the racism that we see in town and the racism that we see across the country comes from stereotypes that just aren't true. these youth outreach workers are working with non-native kids to dispel those stereotypes, to move those ideas and those racist ideas out of the minds and the hearts of those young people who will grow into be adults and live in this city and live across the country, who will teach their children a different way of being. So we're not only investing in our children, Anishinaabe children, Métis children, but we're also investing in non-Aboriginal children in this city. And I think that's an important consideration to take note of. So let me talk about another issue that we discovered when we did the research. Research is about a journey. It's about looking at what the landscape provides us and trying to understand what that landscape is about. Yes, we spoke to kids. Yes, we looked at their school records. Yes, we spoke to youth outreach workers. Yes, we were there. But we also started looking at some of the other realities of Aboriginal people. And here's one of them. We looked at the provincial incarceration rates in this province, and we saw that some of the highest increases in incarceration were young people that were 18 plus. And we looked at the commonality that those people carried in their lives when they became incarcerated. And some of them were pretty astonishing. Most of them that go into provincial incarceration don't have a grade 12 education. They don't have a high school diploma. Many of them came from dysfunctional family backgrounds. Many of them started having an introduction to crime early in their lives at 13 and 14. Many of them didn't know their language, didn't know their culture. And that's some of the commonalities that happen and end up putting our young men and women in prison. When we looked at Biiwaase'aa and we studied Biiwaase'aa and what it did, it countered each and every one of those commonalities. Well, here's another reality. In 2012-13, to keep a child in Biiwaase'aa cost $2,700 a year. To keep a young man or a young woman in provincial incarceration in this province costs something like $62,000 a year. So it becomes a business argument, if you will. It's cheaper to keep our children in school than it is to warehouse our children in provincial jails in this province. Cheaper by far. So one of the recommendations that we came up with that we thought was extraordinarily important is that, yes, I said that it needs to be, the program needs to be expanded in the senior elementary and high schools, but it also needs to be better funded. And I'm going to ask Tammy to speak of the funding issues, if she would, because she's more familiar with those.
Funding issues are always up and down, and from year to year, it's the same sort of cycle of proposal writing. Again, it's the same type of uncertainty whether or not we'll be able to continue status quo, or we have to make adjustments to, budgets, which affects, it affects obviously the program and the children and the staff. It's a continual sort of struggle to keep up with all the reporting and all the different timelines. It's not the same with all the funders. We deal with, at least 3 different year ends. Our auditing year end is March 31st, and, there's just a lot of, I wouldn't say difficulties, there's a lot of challenges in keeping all of that straight. And one of the things that is, that I haven't been able to find is core funding. And a lot of times, along with core funding is stable funding for the staff, especially the full-time, youth outreach workers. Every funding envelope or funder has certain and specific things that they say that they could fund, at certain times and those kinds of things. And sometimes what happens is we'll have more funding in an area for programming, a little less for wages, or vice versa. So it's never always quite what you would, want it to be. However, it's working. The last time when we were having funding struggles, that we had to really, make the announcement that we had to have a program closure, just because of the timing of, sunsetting of certain funding, and just all around uncertainty and whether or not we'd be able to continue. We've had back when the Urban Aboriginal Strategy first started, there was a buzzword at the time about horizontality. And horizontality and the idea of Urban Aboriginal Strategy was to start bringing in government partners and agencies, provincial and local and those types of things to create partnerships and support a project. The community, this program came from grassroots. The Urban Aboriginal Advisory Committee was instrumental in allowing funding to continue being flowed to Biiwaase'aa. And since then we've been lucky as an Aboriginal organization to have the United Way and City come on board, and they were able to, within that time, we were the first Aboriginal nonprofit charitable organization in the city to receive funding from both of them. Our local DSAP has been funding us as well. We have our federal government, which is the Aboriginal Affairs Northern Development Canada, through the Urban Aboriginal Strategy, has been wonderful. Things are changing a bit in that area with transferring of dollars and things, and the announcement that happened within this past year to the National Association of Indian Friendship Centers. So there's a lot of changes in that area. The provincial level has been, very, very steady. We had a new funder come on board, and that was the Ministry of Education through the Safe Schools unit, and they are kind of like a bit of our savior. If I could put it in those terms, because they are third year funding us now, and they're able to cover wages. Like, there's a lot of funding issues around that, like I said. So that has been core and key for us. The United Way also locally has been contributing and very supportive. And I think that, just for the amount of funders, which are all on our website, which went live with the release of the report. So we're very excited about that. You can see that on our website, and also the copy of the full research studies there. Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs has been wonderful. Also, the RBC, the Royal Grant, and Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. It's as you can see as I'm naming them, there's a lot of budgets and factors to sort of put together. It's like a puzzle. And when you think the puzzle's almost getting close to being done and it fits this way, it kind of always has to sort of change in order to keep status quo funding and the program running as is.
I think if nothing else, what you hear is the extraordinary capacity of this woman and her staff to cobble together a myriad of funders to make this program run. But I know that it's a really tough go every year, and the energy they put into that could be better put into extending programming for kids, to building more capacity in youth outreach workers, in the stuff that really has a difference in kids. Am I right?
I'm right, yes.
Okay.
And I'd also, like to mention that throughout this all, our past board of directors and our present ones have been, for Shkodi, have been very supportive. They, they provide guidance, and they're able to really help us through times of capacity building within our organization, because we were quite small. We just had Aboriginal Head Start at the time, and one budget. It has grown 4 times that size now, and they were able to start to really look at capacity and funding, getting into, really help the organization be with the times. I mean, yeah, we have a website now. That's a big deal.
I think the takeaway message on this in terms of funding is this program works. The Ministry of Education, and I would call on the minister to give some serious consideration to core funding for this program. And I speak of that as an Aboriginal scholar. I have a PhD. I've worked for 20 years in higher education and faculties of education. My colleague, Dr. Kitchen at Brock, is a faculty member at Brock University in the Faculty of Education. So I speak about this from not only a cultural perspective, but also from a professional perspective as an Aboriginal scholar, Aboriginal researcher who has worked for 20 years in education nationally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. This program works. This program has demonstrated over its 10 years lifespan that it is a valuable inclusion in education in this province. This program keeps kids off the street and in school. This program helps kids stay in school and work through some of their, let's face it, there are issues, personal, familial, social, economic issues, and come out the other side of this program better to function in school. One of the things we want to see is this thing being expanded. It needs to be in senior elementary and high schools in this city where 50% of the student body is Aboriginal. But not only in this city. We're not the only the only city in the Northwest that has a high percentage of Aboriginal kids. Patricia, the last time I looked, was 43% Aboriginal. When we look at the national rates or the provincial rates of grade 12 completion in 2011, what we saw was 65%, only 65% of our people, 18 plus, had a high school diploma. You can't even flip burgers without a high school diploma these days in this province. If we want to make change, if we want to do better for this generation, we need to think very carefully about what that is. And this program, Biiwaase'aa, works well in keeping our kids in school. I think it's quite that simple. We need to expand it. Minister, I ask you to give some consideration to core funding. I ask you to go online. What's the website?
www.shkoday, which is shkoday.com.
This complete report is there, available for the minister, for the ministry to download, for anyone to download and review. Core funding is going to keep this program in business. It's going to allow very talented men and women like Tammy to focus their energies on building this program and hopefully expanding this program into senior elementary and high schools as well. And I think that's one of our messages today.
And I would also just like to thank, I guess in closing, that all the funders that have supported the program in the past, present, and the future, and what this research is providing is the emergent quantitative and qualitative results that are able to show the funders that where you have invested your money has been worthwhile, and if it's to attract future funders, that it is a good investment. We would really like to say, I would really like to say that on behalf of everyone, like the kids especially, that money invested in Biiwaase'aa, it's really worth the time, the while, the energy. Thank you. Miigwech.
Miigwech.